Okay, so what if I told you that some of your worst habits, the ones that make you feel maybe a little disorganized or even a bit strange, are actually signs that your brain is just, well, operating on a whole different level? Today, we're going to reframe three common flaws that might just be your hidden superpowers.
All right, first up, be honest. Do you talk to yourself? Maybe you're muttering your to-do list out loud when no one's around, or you're trying to work through a tough problem and you just talk it out. Okay, and how about your desk? Is it one of those super clean, perfectly organized spaces, or is it more like creative chaos? You know, papers everywhere, books, maybe a few too many coffee mugs.
And for the last one, are you a classic overthinker? Do you find yourself just stuck analyzing a situation from every single angle long after everybody else has already moved on? So, if you answered yes to any of those, then you're going to want to hear this. These aren't character flaws. Turns out, psychology suggests that what society often calls bad habits could actually just be the side effects of a high performance brain.
All right, let's tackle that first one. Talking to yourself. I mean, we've all seen it in the movies, right? It's usually the sign that a character is about to lose it. But is that what's really going on?
So, on one hand, you've got this popular myth that it's, a sign of madness. But the psychological reality? Well, it's something way more interesting. It's actually a process called verbal reasoning. And verbal reasoning is not madness at all. In fact, it's a pretty high-level cognitive tool. See, when you talk to yourself, you're taking that giant jumble of thoughts that's swirling around in your head, and you're actually giving it structure. It's like you're forcing your brain to organize everything, figure out what's important, and in the end, make decisions way more efficiently. So think about it. You're not losing your mind, you're literally making your thoughts concrete so they're easier to manage. You're gaining control, not losing it. And this whole idea of making things easier for your brain, that leads us right into our next habit. Okay, let's talk about the classic messy workspace. We all know one, maybe it's yours. So is it just plain laziness, or could something else be going on? A different kind of focus, maybe?
Well, the myth here is pretty obvious, right? People see a mess and their brain immediately jumps to laziness or total chaos. But the reality is a really cool concept called selective organization. And I know it might sound like a fancy excuse, but there's some serious psychology behind this.
It basically boils down to this. Your brain only has so much fuel in the tank. And really smart people, they often subconsciously decide to spend that precious mental energy on the big, complex ideas, not on the boring stuff like alphabetizing their files or making sure all their pens are perfectly lined up. So get this. It's not that you don't see the mess. It's just that your brain has decided, hey, that's not as important as this huge problem I'm trying to solve. Your focus is just on the bigger picture. And speaking of that kind of focus, it leads us perfectly into our third and final bad habit, overthinking. We hear it all the time, right? That it's just anxiety. But what if it's not? What if it's actually a sign of some serious mental depth? Yeah, the common myth is that it's just needless anxiety, getting stuck in those endless loops of worry. But if we reframe it, if we look at it through a different lens, we see something totally different. We see something called cognitive complexity. So what is that exactly? Well, cognitive complexity is the brain's ability to see the world in all its shades of gray, not just in black and white. It means you're processing a situation with this incredible thoroughness. You're seeing all the little details, all the ripple effects and consequences that most people would just completely miss. Think of it like this. You're not just looking at the problem itself. You're seeing the entire web of connections around it. And yeah, it can be absolutely exhausting, but it is also a pretty remarkable strength. Okay, so let's pull all of this together. This isn't about making excuses for bad habits, not at all. It's about understanding what's actually going on underneath, the cognitive processes at play. It's really about getting a smarter perspective on how our own minds work. So let's do a quick recap of these big reframes. That habit of talking to yourself? That's not madness, that's verbal reasoning. Your brain is just finding clarity. That messy desk? That's selective organization. You're prioritizing big ideas over perfect order. And all that overthinking? That's cognitive complexity, and it's what lets you see the entire web. The point is, these aren't flaws that you need to fix. They might just be signs that your brain is wired for deeper, more complex processing. So instead of fighting them, maybe it's time we learn to appreciate them. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. If these three so-called flaws can actually be reframed as strengths, what other hidden strengths are we taught to see as weaknesses? What parts of you might actually be your greatest assets?